Yeah, I think people like it because they can. People like to. Now, so my day job, I work at a library. I work with kids at the library, so I work in the youth section. And one thing that I've noticed with kids is that like they don't like it when you teach them something, but if you can hide the fact that you're teaching them something and something cool and fun, then they'll go home and they'll be like, "Oh man, I had," and then they'll like, "Oh, I actually learned this thing too." It's kind of like if you have to like take medicine and you put it in. If you have to give your dog medicine, you put it in a biscuit or something. You know, you have to hide that little bit in the humor or whatever that gets people to be digestible, and then they read it and they're like, "Oh wow, like." What if I lose my place in society? Will I still have French fries or whatever? I don't know. So
Yeah.
it's the easiest way to get people to think without coming because I don't want to come off as pretentious to them.
Right.
So you give them this little guy in his weird sweater, and they're like, "All right, whatever." He's kind of a mouthpiece, so
Yeah, it seemed it kind of well, it kind of reminds me of, or it, thinking about Gordy, I think it's kind of like a more grown up Garfield. I think because
yeah,
I was just I just picked up like this like Garfield burps and slurps catalog of I think of all the strips that were in that were published in 2019, and I haven't read Garfield for many years, and I remember kind of growing up with it and watching the cartoons, and so reading this kind of new series, and I can't believe Garfield's still like continuing. It just
yeah,
seems it's like it's just littered with so many bad dad jokes. And
yeah,
the only thing that saves is that Garfield is like so sarcastic, and he just does not care, like and but I just feel like I feel like the writing is really geared towards maybe like young children. It's not something that I kind of appreciate. Like sometimes the humor is just like ugh, like that's the kind of thing your parents would say or something. And but I think with Gordy, it's like it's a little bit edgier and more mature. And I think and now that you kind of talked about your work with kids and trying to teach them through humor or entertainment, what's interesting is that you were able to kind of write for like a broad range of ages, right? Because Gordy could be for kids because it's like it's cartoony, and the jokes aren't like, I guess it's not so, I guess, adult that they can't understand it, but then it's like us as adults totally get it, right? Because we've kind of been through some of the scenarios that you present.
yeah. And I'm glad you said that because that is exactly my goal for Gordy. Because when I'm doing something like Water, and I'm at conventions or like free comic book day, and people come up and they know me and they're like, "I want to buy this. Is this something my kid can read?" And I say, "Well, it's not inappropriate, but I don't think that your kid is going to understand the the emotion that goes into something like Water." So when I started doing Gordy, I knew that I wanted something that was very kind of silly, but also not like Garfield territory, like you mentioned. Which is actually funny because I'm staring right now. I'm staring at on my bookshelf. I have this really old collection of Garfield. It's probably the first thing I ever bought from a Scholastic Books Fair, and it's like the spine is just like taped up, and you can't even tell it's Garfield. It's just so old. So it's funny that you brought that up. But yeah, so you want something that's like to being able to. It's like when you watch a cartoon, like Ren and Stimpy or something when you're young. Maybe that's a bad example. It's just like something that you watch a cartoon as you're young and you get a different experience than when you read it as an older, as an adult. Because I have people who like tell me they read Gordy to their kids. There's the one where they're talking about ordering Chinese food and they say Peking duck and cards.
Yeah.
And one of my coworkers read that to their kid, and the kid said, "Oh no, they're gonna eat Gordy." And I just thought, this is so funny because like that's the concern is just like different. So I wanted to do that because yeah, I do straddle that age line, and I do tend to have a lot of friends that are like whole families, like relate to their kids and their teenagers and them from the position I work in. So I think that has affected my work. But the
Mm.
other thing was I kind of wanted to reject. There's a lot of web comics and comics that are comic books that are very cynical and very like the main character is just like riddled with anxiety, and they're like this hard kind of like modern person. And I started to write Gordy, and I just thought, Gordy, he's going to be different to the point where people are kind of, hopefully people notice and like he stands out to them. And so I think giving him that quality and surrounding him with people that are different than him, the adults can see like, oh man, these people are like modern people, and then this duck is basically just like this fresh faced little
see that.
cherub.
Yeah, that's awesome that you mentioned. I see that. That's crazy.
Yeah, it was one of my goals, and I'm glad that you are able to see that, because like every time I read it, and you guys know this, like when you write and draw your own stuff, you're like, I know all the signs that are here and all the cues, but will the reader pick up on it?
Right.
And when they do, it's like, wow, it's almost like you're just like, what a complete accident, I actually pulled that off.
That happened to me on Webtoons like so much. When we get comments, I would be like, there's no way anybody's ever going to see this. And there was one person, and I can't remember who they were, Angela. Maybe you can help remind me. Do you remember what their screen name was, or screen name? It's screen name.
Yeah, I honestly don't, but I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, like there's that one person that just like got every single thing, and I was like, wow, like you should be helping us with Gale.
Like, it does feel good.
Yeah, but at the same time, they were like, I'm wondering what's going to happen to this person, what's going to happen to this person, what's going to happen to this person. I'm like, you know what? Some things that you actually are wondering about, I wasn't even thinking about. So thank you for reminding me. So that way I know to write that down and go back and actually answer those questions, because you know what? I don't want any plot holes where, yeah. So it's like, because we go on this huge, Gale is this huge, just epic story that just involves so many characters. And so, you see somebody for a minute and then they're gone, but they're a big part of it, but they're gone for a little bit. And then it's like, you got to pick up on that sometime. It's kind of like, kind of what I want to make it is, you ever seen that movie Crash?
No, but I do know what you're talking about, like in terms of the narrative.
Yeah, so it's kind of like everything just comes together in the end, but everybody's got a separate story, and then it all kind of just meshes together. And, that's what I was kind of doing, because I will say that in chapter 1, I don't know if you noticed this, but Gale chapter 1 was very linear. It just followed the hero basically through the whole process, and I think that's important. And you can give me your opinion on it, but I think it's important to have at least your first issue follow the hero throughout the whole issue, so you can kind of get introduced to like his world, like because he is the main protagonist, right? So you want to just follow his world and kind of set things up and kind of set the people that are actually, that have actually been around him, or just you want to set his life up in front of the viewer, and kind of get them to know who this person is for at least the first issue. But what I tried to do with chapter 2 is like, okay, well, if I start off linear in chapter 2, it's just going to be like a continuation of chapter 1. And it's like, I kind of want a break of pace. And so when I started off with chapter 2, I started off in a completely different world from Gale. Have you read a little bit of chapter 2 yet?
Yeah, I've read up to. So here's the thing. I was going to talk to you guys about this. I read up to the point where I letter, because I actually really like being surprised as to what goes on. Like,
okay.
When you guys are like, here's a new page, I'm like, because I have access to the stuff, but I'm like, I really want to, like, I don't know. There's like I have this sort of old feeling of like natural curiosity where I'm like, oh, I want to make this discovery as it happens. It's such a cool feeling when I look at the script of the page you guys give me to letter, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, okay, next one. Because I've been really tempted to look ahead, but I'm like, I want to follow this odyssey as it unfolds.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So you did notice though how in chapter 2, like it starts off in a completely different world.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do that to not, to kind of like break away from that first issue where it was linear, where you followed Gale, because you know that's when you start really introducing the world that's going to be involved with Gale, not just the world that Gale's in right now, but like it's almost like a foreshadowing.
Right.
And that's where I was like, okay, well, let's just go ahead and introduce a few characters, like Mama Seraphine and
Yeah.
like Paul Prada, and some of the soldiers and the minions and things like that.
Yeah, I think it's important too because, like, just from like reading one and like working on two, and lettering two, the tonal. I think one, it's completely natural as a writer to be like, I want to shift up the way that I write this, and I think like once you get the linear of number one, I think you got people reading, and then they're more likely to go along with you instead of like, because if you start non-linear, and then, people are going to be like, because not everybody's like in like has the cues to read nonlinear right away. So you start that first issue off kind of like linear, normal pace and stuff. People are with you, and then by issue two, they're like, okay, well, I'm going to figure out what happens now because you have set up this mystery, and the nonlinear thing even makes it more of a sort of a mystery, right? And so
Right.
they're like, okay, I'm with them now, So I think it's a good narrative move to do that.
All right, I appreciate that. That's awesome. What I've never actually asked you, Angela, what you thought about that approach. So it'd be kind of cool to see what your thoughts about when you first got introduced to chapter 2, what you thought.
Well, I do like so I've actually read up to chapter 3, and so I really like 2 and 3 a lot. I think probably 3 is my favorite, and there's a scene that I will not speak about that I really really want to get to. So I'm actually kind of happy that we're almost done. And chapter 2 is really long, by the way. It's probably going to end up being about 30 pages, which is, I think, fairly long for like a standard like comic issue. But yeah, I've always I thought like chapter 1, like like you guys said, I understand why you had to kind of make it linear and kind of in kind of I always felt it was I don't know how to say it. It was just kind of not predictable, but just like kind of a very standard way of like telling a story, right? But I still like chapter 1 in the sense that it was just very atmospheric. There was kind of a lot of it was a lot slower in terms of like the build up, and whereas like when you read chapter 2, you just get right into it, and it gets even darker. Like you've made me draw some like really dark stuff, man. Like like the stuff that I have to research to kind of draw the pages. It's interesting.
That's my Twitter personality. But no, but like I'm glad that you said that, like, because I think that it brought back a memory of when you and I were talking about it, and we were just finishing up chapter 1, and we were both talking about it, and we were like, oh man, I'm so glad chapter 1 is over, because I'm so done with chapter 1. I'm ready to go on to chapter 2. And it's like, I know it's not going to be that way for the audience, because the audience is going to read it, and then it's not going to take them near as long as it took us to create it. But at the end of it all, it's like we knew there were just like so many exciting things that were about to happen. And it's like, chapter 1 was great, writing it the first time, reading it through the first time, and, kind of rewriting some things. We kind of took a little bit out of chapter 1. I remember I was standing on the balcony of a hotel in a school, and we were talking about taking some things out and rewriting it. And we kind of rewrote, a couple of scenes, and it kind of shortened it just a little bit. Well, actually, I think it actually ended up, when we actually did all the panels, I think it ended up being almost close to the same. But when we took it out, it actually made a little bit more sense, and but by the time we got through with it, after I rewrote everything and after I read it through, the final draft, and then you were doing it, I was like, kind of done with it. Like I was ready to move on. And, because it had just been going on for so long, and I've been rereading it, and I was ready for something. I don't know. I was excited to see your art on chapter 2.
Yeah, and also just to mention that in chapter one, so what had happened was I kind of went through like a artistic growth spurt during chapter one,
I
and
noticed that.
so by the time we uploaded it to Webtoons, there was just the first few pages just looked very different from like what it ended up being, and so I did kind of go back and kind of quote unquote like remaster the like the first few pages because it was just kind of too different stylistically. The other thing I would say is I actually regret not like kind of I wish I made chapter one even slower than it is. And the reason why I say this is after I put together like the PDF book that we for Cosmic Love and for comicsology. Wow, what a
There you
tongue
go.
twister. It like when I actually read it like in that format that it was designed to be in, it was actually very fast. Like it went by really fast, and I'm like, oh man, I wish I could have put in like more like rain scenes where he's just like looking out the window and slow it down. Like and it's interesting because like when we were just we were initially talking about social media and how fast paced the world has become, and how everyone's kind of running around with like ADD, and I actually like the reason why like Gale appealed to me is because it's just kind of like, well, if the world's going that way, I want to obviously just go the opposite way and make a really slow series, because that kind of interested me to see if how that would kind of sit in today's world. And I also think that I actually really like slow moving series. Like I watch a lot of these dark noir like detective films. This one in particular called like The Bridge from it's a Sweden series. It's like very dark and it's very slow, and it like builds up like kind of over time. And I think the only other thing I can compare it to is like The Killing, like the American version, The Killing.
My
That
wife
was
and I watched that because
yeah,
you
because
actually,
that's actually in Seattle, and I wanted you to watch
yeah.
that. That was just very dark, and but I only recommend like I think the first two seasons, because I think after that they kind of went to this very generic kind of formula. So like in the first two seasons, they were just basically investigating one murder, right? One case,
Right.
one murder, and how it kind of ties into all the kind of various characters in different stratas of like society. And then I felt like they went towards the more generic model of like I don't know. I think they just the last two seasons they kind of quickened the pace, and I felt like it really lost that kind of atmospheric, like gritty, like drama that they created in the first two seasons. And I don't know. I was just interested in making something like how, like how they say like if you're trying to make an interesting story. I don't know where I read this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're trying to make something interesting, like try and write something very boring or like mundane. And I'm probably paraphrasing that wrong, but have you ever heard that like in like, I don't know, in your learning about writing thing, where it's like just try and write, don't try and be exciting, but try and just kind of write what is like everyday, what is like mundane, and try and make like the mundane interesting rather than like putting everything in for the
I
kitchen
think
sink.
that's important. I think what you said about making the mundane interesting, I kind of, that kind of resonates with me. However, you don't want to keep the mundane mundane. You know what I mean? You kind of pick up what I'm putting down there.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, like you want to kind of start with something that's kind of familiar, that's like something small that that you don't really think is important, and just try and focus on starting at that point to maybe make it relatable for yourself. And
Well,
it's
yeah.
like, yeah.
Well, it's like when we go in Gale, and it slows down a lot. Actually, it starts out very slow, and I don't think it picks up until the very end. But during that time, what are you doing? You're going from a funeral, which is a very slow paced, scenario. I've never, if you find yourself in a fast paced funeral, you're it's probably going to be a bad time.
Yeah.
and and if you so it's kind of slow paced from the beginning, and then you find him in a car ride, reminiscing, and it goes to a conversation, and then it goes from the car ride to a bunch of media outside of his apartment. I can't talk. Apartment complex, and it's like it's just showing like all of like I said, it's very linear, so it's showing like everything that he's going to, from the funeral to the house, and to it just shows everything that he goes through to the very end of the chapter. And but during that, you're finding that he's very deep in thought about what's going to happen, about what he wants to do, about what his kind of what his goals are. But you kind of realize that when you're reading with him, like, he's kind of all over the place because he doesn't know what he wants to do. um I mean, he thinks he knows what he wants to do, but he doesn't. He knows nothing more than the audience knows. He just knows he has to do something, right? And it's just kind of like he's this average guy. He's like, but he's not even just an average guy. He's this average wealthy guy with this huge amount of money that's like privileged, and he's never been through an experience like this. But he's also like kind of got a past, and I feel like you're going through his whole day. Basically, that's what you're doing. You're going through his whole day, and you're building the relationship with him and his friend Lori, and I think that that is very mundane, but at the same time, when you're building those relationships and you're seeing what's happening in his life, it's like, I don't think that's a life that you can relate to, but it's not a life that like everybody normally lives, So it's kind of like what you were saying with Jordan's comic, on something like Water. It's where you kind of look in and you feel like you're spying on someone. And I feel like that's kind of what you feel like you're doing with Gale. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I think it's important because you do want people to know this is the world that we live in, but then you do have to separate the character because this isn't just anybody. So
Right.
you do want them to be like, well, this is a familiar area, but this is kind of where we break off, is we're going into this guy's journey. It's like, any comic book starts, because you guys are talking about the first issue or the first chapter being kind of a slower pace, and I think that's every, the whole time you guys are talking, I'm thinking that's every comic book origin, right? You have to get to know the world and how these things came to be before you can really take any risks. Anybody who these are all bad examples because all the superheroes I'm thinking of lived pretty crazy lives before they were super. Like, I'm thinking like Green Lantern, he was like a jet pilot, and that's not very relatable. The Hulk was testing nuclear bombs and stuff. So, but you do have to kind of go through the origin period. It's a very important
Right.
step.
It's funny that you bring that up because I think we were talking about. Well, I might have mentioned in one of. I know I tried to do a series on, and we might bring that back one day. Shoot, what was it called?
Oh, was
When
it? Is it the YouTube thing, the Chasing Storms?
Chasing Storms, yeah. When we were doing Chasing Storms, I kind of went in and talked about how, Gale is a vigilante. He's taking this problem that he has into his own hands and trying to solve this mystery for himself. But he's not like, kind of like the superheroes that that live the crazy lives. Like, I kind of mentioned Batman, and I kind of mentioned, you know, um, the Punisher, because these people, like, that they were trained before they actually started. So like Batman was way too young to start you know doing something about it, and he actually had his whole life to prepare for it. And then at the time, when Frank Castle like had his inciting incident, like he had already been trained to do it his whole
Mhm.
life. So like this comic you kind of see where, you know, it's kind of like this guy who's rich and privileged, and he lives this, you know, nice life, even though he's kind of he's kind of damaged, you know, because of his past, but he still lives this nice cushy life. And you know, it kind of shows that we all have our problems, but up to that point he had never experienced anything like he had set out to do, so he had no training, he didn't know what he was going to do, and he's kind of like a bumbling idiot. You know, I would that's exactly how I would describe Gale in my mind. I don't know if you guys see the same thing I do, but like I'm kind of like writing this, he's kind of like an idiot, you know, he's like, I'm going to do this, and then he doesn't exactly know what he's about to go into, and he knows that he's like been warned, but it's like, you know, and it's kind of like maybe you wouldn't have done the same thing, but like somebody would, you know, somebody would have just been like, you know what, let's do this, and then like gotten themselves way in too deep, and that's kind of like what Gale has done.
Well, Gale, like, actually, I don't think I've ever told you this before, Seth, but Gale is actually, he was a hard character to get into because it, like, I know that it was important for you to have, to make all the characters relatable, but I think Gale is the character that I personally relate the least to. And it was really kind of, I, I just didn't really, like, you know, I don't know. It just didn't really click with like me and him. He was just this kind of very standoffish character to me when I was kind of reading him, and
That's a compliment, by the way.
and it's yeah, that's it's what I got. I just felt like he was just this kind of okay. I guess the best comparison that I can make, and not that, you know, whatever. I'm not saying that it's on the same level by any means, but like so I'm like a huge like Buffy fan, like a Joss Whedon fan, and so they did like this. So Joss Whedon did like a Angel like spin-off off of one of like the characters who was Buffy's love interest, and they kind of developed him. And I remember reading an interview where he was basically talking about how Angel is a hard, you know, it was harder to write Angel than it was to write Buffy, because Angel's this tall, handsome man, and in a sense, kind of like what you would think would be kind of a generic hero, right? Just tall, dark, and handsome. And that's how I felt about Gale. Like he was just very, I just couldn't like really get into him. He was just, I don't know, he was just kind of like perfect, but he had like this troubled past. And I think when you started kind of writing, I think later in the chapter when you know, he's kind of stumbling around and like tripping over himself, and it's like, oh, thank God he has like flaws, you know.
He has a lot of them.
Yeah. So I think that's when I kind of understood. Okay, so he is this broody, like, you know, kind of very dramatic, standoffish guy in a way, right? He is kind of, there's just these points where he gets very angry, and for like, you know, just, I mean, it's expected, but at the same time, it's like he can't really control his own emotions, and yet he keeps everyone at like arm's length, and that's a really hard character to draw.
Yeah.
So yeah. But I had a question for both of you guys, and it kind of relates to, you know, making comics and making the comic that you want to, and you know, I know that perhaps I know, Seth, you've gotten like a lot of feedback on like the storyline, and some, you know, some comments of how you should have made the beginning and so on and so forth, right? Because I think you wanted to make a slow paced one, but there was also people that were kind of giving us examples. Well, look at this comic and look how they did it. They have this explosive, you know, beginning. And I guess my question to both of you is like, you know, kind of what were some of the, you know, the best and the worst kind of feedback or constructive criticisms that you got, and how did you determine which ones to take?
That's a great question.
I'll let you start off, Jordan.
Okay, I can tell you right now. I'll tell you the tail end, the worst one I ever got, because I don't. It's like some of the things that people say on the internet. I just had to laugh. But when I started Gordy, uh, my art style is always kind of growing, and one of the things with Gordy was that I really jumped in before I was ready for the art side, but I knew that I wouldn't start if I didn't just start then. And so I'm not going to count this as feedback, but I have had people who have got on my Gordy Instagram and said, like, this is the worst art I've ever seen in my life. And that's important to hear because, like, the first time you hear that, it is the worst thing that and in terms of writing too, it's the worst thing that you'll feel in terms of putting out your comic. But then once you get over that, because there's just like Instagram trolls, you just have to laugh because people will say stuff like that. They'll be like like they'll say, this is killing me, or this is the worst thing I've ever read, and you're just like, why would you say that? I just like tried my hardest to do this thing, but then you just have to realize that like they are not trying to be constructive. They're just trying to be like trolls. And then it makes all the bad stuff that people say about your comic like feel like nothing because it bounces off because you just realize like I'm going to write what I want to write. But with Gordy, the big thing I get is people suggesting gags, like jokes, and sometimes they're pretty good, but a lot of times, I don't know, it's kind of weird. Like, jokes are a sensitive gray area because, like, you don't want to take somebody else's joke necessarily because it's like there's kind of this unwritten thing that's like you have to be original in your jokes, and if you take somebody else's joke, it's not necessarily like writing your own thing. So that one I struggle with a lot because people say, "Oh, this was really funny. What if you had him do this, or what if you had him do that?" And I think Seth will probably touch on this at some, with his answers. Like sometimes people will give you suggestions, like, "What if he does this? What if he does that?" And you're like, "But that's not really in his character." And I know it's funny, but that's not really his character. I have a hard time remembering specifics. I did get a guy who bought my Something Like Water book, and he was telling me about different ways that I needed to improve the art. And I thought, he was trying to be helpful, but it was also kind of like like one of those things where he was like, "Oh, and also this could change, and also the lettering isn't very good." And I'm like, "I know, like, calm down, dude. Like, I know, like, I'm working on it." So, it's nothing specific that I have, but like when you're giving criticism, like try not to like heap. At least like for me, it's like don't go through all areas of the comic and like, "Oh, needs work," and like maybe focus on one thing at a time, because I was like, okay, like I guess I'll just throw away this comic, it's fine.
Okay. And are you and this is kind of related to like when you're talking about jokes, Jordan, are you still like doing are you still doing comedy? Because I think you were doing stand up at one point.
I was, and I got out of it because I started doing the comics more, and it was just like way too much energy to dedicate to both things, and I knew that one was going to be, one was my passion above the other, and there weren't a lot of opportunities out here where I am to do comedy. And I think about getting back into it every now and then, but like the amount of energy I expend on, because the secret with Gordy is I try to stay like 5 weeks ahead, so like the amount of energy that I do on that in terms of comedy is like I would probably be too burned out to write stand up.
You
I
say
wish we were
5 weeks.
5 weeks ahead.
You
Sorry.
say,
Yeah,
like,
I know it sounds insane, but the thing was I started developing Gordy in like probably November of last year. Like I was writing scripts and stuff, and so my plan was to subscribe or to submit to Go Comics all along, and they needed like 6 weeks of stuff. So it took me like months to do that because I like scrapped it and started over like twice, and so I got 6 weeks done, and then after they rejected it, because I knew they were going to reject it because it's my first time, but once they rejected it, I was just like, okay, I want to make sure I keep up this headway of at least 5 weeks so I can like not, because like you were talking about buffers earlier, because like when I did comics in the past, I never did a buffer, and like I just think that I just went like the complete opposite this time, and I was like, all right, 5 weeks or die.
Oh my god, that's some mad discipline though, because it's like don't you ever kind of get that urge? It's like, oh, I want to share this. This is such a good joke. I just want to put it out there.
Yeah, and sometimes I will do that. I will, if it's like a close person that I know won't share it or whatever. I'll send them the joke ahead of time, especially because like one of the characters on there that's Gordy's cousin is really influenced by my brother in real life. And so every now and then I will write a really good joke with that guy, and I have to send it to him because I'm like, I need
Yeah.
him to know this rather than wait 5 weeks. But it does make it so like because I'm 5 weeks ahead, when you guys see the stuff that I put out, like the day I post it, I'm usually like, oh, this is a terrible joke because I'm like, I know I've known it for so long. I know the punchline for so long that it makes it really hard for me to decide if it's really good or not. So the
Well,
day I put it out, I'm like, oh, this wasn't that funny. But then people like it, but I'm like, it's not that funny. It's kind of like,
that's kind
how
of
you guys
like
were talking
what.
about pacing.
Yeah, that's kind of like what we were talking about with issue one. How we had just went over it for so long, we
Yeah,
were done with it. Yeah, and I think it's funny that you were like, oh, when I write this joke, I have to send it to my brother because it's like, I think that Angela knows that I love writing dialogue. I don't know why. I love it. It's my thing. And once I write some like dialogue that I kind of I'm really proud of, um, I have to be careful because sometimes I want to just like post the dialogue and show people like, look, this is like what these people are talking about right now, and it's like
yeah,
this is really cool, like that I can make and like it's kind of like uh, it's kind of like a thing where I'm just like spur of the moment, like just want to share with everybody what's going on in the comic, and like you could give spoilers away that way.
yeah.
I don't want to do that, but like at the same time, I'm just like you know kind of like really wanting to at the same time, and I have
I
to
know
use a method of control.
Yeah.
it is hard because you write something or you draw something and you're really proud of it, but then you're like, you really have to stop yourself because it's like, oh, wow. Especially if it's like if there's a storyline going on, that's
And during this time when you were kind of, doing the 5 months buffer, I do remember that you were. I can't remember exactly, but were you also kind of running the water series at the same time?
yeah.
Or
So the
okay.
yeah, so the water, I do them at the same time. The difference is that so Gordy, I do Gordy, I do like 5 weeks out. So basically, like I do every week, I do 1 week of Gordy, and that keeps me ahead. But then with something like water, I usually wait till the week before because I want them to be as honest and real as possible. So I'll wait till like the back half of like Wednesday, Thursday to start something like water because then I'll be able to tap into the emotion I'm feeling the most.
Mm.
And I think that's part of it. I feel so honest is because I'm doing them as I'm basically feeling the emotions. Like the one I did last week about getting all that money taken out of my account, like that had just happened to me, and I was just so furious still and like full of anger, and so I was like, okay, I'm going to sit down and write this. Whereas Gordy, it's like, okay, I have a joke that I wrote 2 months ago. I can put this down now, and it'll appear 5 weeks from now.
Oh,
I
hello.
think we're having
Oh,
some technical difficulties.
yeah. It was kind of odd. It was kind of yeah, cutting in and off. But I think I caught the last part where you were talking about how with Gordy you have to wait 5 months. It's like you write the joke and then you have to kind of wait 5 months for, I guess, to see the reaction to it.
Well, so with Gordy, it's only 5 weeks. It's not months.
Oh,
I
sorry,
would be,
weeks. Okay.
yeah. If it was 5 months, I would be like
Woo!
insane because I wouldn't remember.
Why was I thinking it was like five months?
I
Okay,
don't know.
well,
That would be really impressive. Well, some people like. I don't know if you guys know. I think the guy who did Beetle Bailey for a long time, he just died last year. Mort Walker. I think they said he stayed 3 months ahead. Uh, and then some people stay like a year ahead, and it's like that's ridiculous. But yeah, if if it didn't catch completely, basically the difference is something like Water is done like a couple days before I put it out, just to keep the emotion in it and to make it feel real. So Gordy is like this very processed thing where it's like, okay, I have a script, I wrote a joke, I could use that, and then I'll put that out. But so it's easy to run them at the same time because I'm not doing them like, because it does give me a break, so I don't have to do them all the time. Like I don't have to switch from doing one to the other, which I would lose my mind. But
Right, right. And oh man, because I was wondering, I'm like, how does Jordan keep up with all these jokes? Like everyone is a joke. He's just pounding them out. He has a secret, and this is what I really wanted to pick your brain about. But yeah, that's amazing. And that's like Seth. That's something I regret a bit with Gale is that just not having like not waiting long enough to like put them out. And I always feel like we're just running out of content, you know what I mean? So like I think part of it is just figuring out like how can we kind of deliver in a way that's just like that's deliver in a way so there's like it's like less pause or like I guess waiting time between like I guess the art and the issues and stuff.
well,
It's because we kind of tried to like run with it, and we wanted to get it out there. And I did have a conversation with someone when we were like in the phase of it, and they're like, "Get it done first." And I was like, "Well, it's too late now."
I'll tell you guys, there are two things that are, because I thought about this while we were talking. There are two things really. One is that Gordy is like my third or fourth web comic that I've run, so I do have that experience of, because my first, basically everything up until Gordy was like, we're going to do it now and we're going to do it live and we're going to, hopefully I'm going to have enough stuff. And I think, whereas Gale is kind of is this, if I'm right in remembering, this is kind of like your first big collaboration
Yep.
in a longer run comic. So I do think you guys, I think that is something that happens when you do the first thing. It's like, is you get, because I did it too, where I was like, I'm just gonna jump in, so I did take. It took me a couple years to learn, like, okay, I should have more stuff. But then the other thing that I think is like more important is that in terms of Gordy, the art and the writing are not as intensive as Gale. Like I have seen the script and I have seen the art, and it does take more time. So I think you guys, I think you have to look at it like I have this thing that I can draw in like. I don't know, maybe like I can pencil it in like 20 minutes and draw it in like 25 or something. So, whereas your art is like way more realistic, so there is that sort of difference, So I'm keeping up 5 weeks ahead because I'm basically drawing like a newspaper comic strip, and it's not as intensive and good looking as or written as Gale. So I think, you have that, which I think is another thing that people will forgive that, if you don't have a normal, quote unquote normal schedule. I think people look at the work and they're like, well, this is something that's worth waiting for. So I think that's a big difference,
Well, I mean, that's always like the hope, or they just kind of forget and just move on to the next thing. So that's always tough. And Jordan, like I wanted to ask you too, like because I know that I guess I actually I have in my hands the kind of, I guess, the first or one of the issues of Egghead.
Oh boy.
And yeah, and this was back in the day because you mailed it out to me, and I
yes, I remember
kept it, and the short stacks, and also the pin. And I wanted to kind of ask you, because you were doing kind of collaborations, I guess before initially for your first few comics, and now you're doing the art and the writing. And I wanted to kind of hear about your experiences, I guess, with both of them, and what advantages there are to kind of working alone versus working with people, and which one you prefer, and so on.
Sure. So that's interesting, so when I started out, I just gotten out of college and I was a writer, and I had drawn pretty much all my life, but nothing serious, and so I didn't think that I would have the art that people would want to look at, which at the time I absolutely didn't, and still now, obviously, my art style's still changing and everything. But what happened originally was I was working with people, and then I just I was surrounded by a lot of people here in my immediate area that were very gung ho about the process, and then eventually they kind of got and you can attest to this. The drawing is a lot more. It's a lot more work than I think you set out to think it is, because when you draw a picture, you're drawing a picture, but when you're drawing a comic, it's like, okay, I've drawn this panel, and I've drawn this panel, and I've had to draw this person 15 times or whatever, and you really really have to like it. And I think these people were like, "Ooh, this is more than I thought." So, and the other thing was I felt kind of bad because like I couldn't pay people, and I started to feel really bad about that. So I started making a web comic, which was just like complete non sequitur stuff. And I was drawing on my Wacom at the time, and I was just terrible. I didn't know how to use Photoshop, and my coloring was bad and everything. And but then I just really started to fall in love with having not necessarily complete control, but just like being able to do whatever I pictured in my mind. And I always knew that like if I was going to write and draw something, it was going to be like short form comedy. And so I thought, let's just take that leap. And so I spent the last probably 2 or 3 years drawing every day. And it gets to be nice because now there are pros and cons to this. It gets to be nice because like I don't have to. Now, I think you guys have a really great working relationship, but that's, some people it's harder to work with. You're not as in contact with them. So it's nice for me to just be able to say, like, okay, like, this is what I'm going to do, and this is how I'm going to do it. The other nice thing is, like, when I'm writing, because when I started writing for other people, I had, like, a very Alan Moore-esque script where everything was very detailed. But now I kind of just, like, jot down ideas, and I'm able to draw them. Because when you're drawing something you write, you kind of already see the way you want it to look in your head,
Right,
and
right.
it makes it a little easier for me. And I think I liked kind of writing scripts for people because I would kind of try and personalize them and like talk to the artist as I was writing, so they could get lost in my sea of text. Because I think my first couple scripts were like just super verbose, because like I said, I was trying to replicate Alan Moore. But it is nice to just kind of jot down and like have the idea of the expression. Like, for example, when I'm writing Gordy, it's like, oh, I can see perfectly in my head the face he's going to make. And the other thing is, my art always kind of lent itself to the cartoon side of things. Like, we're talking about newspaper comics. My art has always kind of lent itself to that. And when I got past a certain point of writing and drawing, I knew that I could be into that, and I was like fully embracing myself in how I drew. Because when you start to draw, you're like, man, is this going to be good enough for people? But then when you find your niche or whatever, it's like, okay, I was meant to draw like Calvin and Hobbes or Hagar the Horrible or whatever, and that's a really great feeling. So, but I will say the cons are, like I said earlier, like working in a vacuum, you kind of start to work so much by yourself that you're like, you sort of miss that collaboration, which part of the reason I started doing comics was like so I could collaborate with people. And then I found out that like I just kind of like working at my desk, but I do kind of miss that. But it's to me it's kind of fun because you're just like you're able to be silly. Or like me personally, I'm able to be silly and just kind of draw the weird cartoon anatomy, and not have to worry about much other than if the communication is clear. And I don't know, I think it's fun because you're doing both sides, and I think that does make it a little harder sometimes because it's a little longer, but there is a little more well, I was going to say a little more communication, but I don't know, I guess I'm just talking to myself the whole time. So
That's the best communication you can have.
yeah, I mean, I do like collaboration, but I think in terms of my vision of this Gordy specifically, I think it's been kind of leading up to this, and it's been a nice couple of years. Um, it's if I can put it into, this is how I think of it. I can put it into reference is I had all these people that were kind of like close friends of mine that wanted to help, but then they all kind of like got into their own thing, and it was kind of like at the end of the original Avengers when Thanos gets the gauntlet. He's like, "I'll do it myself." That's exactly how I feel.
Yeah.
And I think it
My,
works really well for like water, especially because when you kind of what makes it so personal and so intimate is that you're actually drawing yourself, like it's you, the writer. It's not someone else kind of
yeah,
reinterpreting your inner thoughts. And
yeah,
Because it's autobiographical. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And on the note of collaboration, Jordan, you and I think, oh my God, like when we first met, I think both of
yeah.
us were just like blogging on
WordPress.
WordPress, and this was like the time when I was just like I just quit my full time job and kind of figuring out like the wonderful world of freelancing, and we started talking, and you kind of introduced me into this world of like comics that I got really into, like with Alan Moore and things like that. And we actually attempted to do like a collaboration together called Small World. And this is kind of an embarrassing story for me, and it's such a bad, like this is such a typical example of my weird like disease of perfectionism, and mixed with just terrible time management. And like like I guess long story short, it's like I think it was something like I just wanted to make it like as awesome as possible. So like I actually like modeled this whole like town in like Google SketchUp. So it's like there's this actual 3D town that exists of like the world that was that was going to go into the comic. And I was like doing all this stuff and not really knowing like how I was going to put it together, and it just kind of got to the point where it's like, oh my God, I need to kind of find a way to also pay the bills, and it just got very messy, and unfortunately it was never completed. And then a couple of years later I picked it up again. I took like a class in anatomy and for comic book writers, and I actually workshopped three more of the pages like in that class. So I've been kind of working on it on and off, because I really kind of enjoy your writing. I really loved like the story that you wrote. That was kind of I think with you, Jordan, I think what you're really good at doing is just like writing a script that suits like the artist's style. And I know that you kind of like I think that that's kind of what you were trying to do with your short stories at that time. And so like anyways, Small World has always been kind of this like, oh man, like I take full accountability for the spectacular failure of that. And I know like Seth has been kind of floating around the idea of perhaps after we kind of make this transition to Nine Muse, and after we get like the chapter 2 finished, perhaps revisiting that, and like maybe publishing it again and using it as a way to kind of promote Nine Muse, and also promote like Hotcake Comics, and just like I don't know, maybe, and I'm gonna put this out there, and you guys can like shoot it down or whatever. But like I'm like what I'm kind of envisioning is like where like a model where like with Cosmic Love they had like all the creators submit their own kind of writing and art as part of the Kickstarter campaign. And so I thought it would be cool, like when we do actually get like a Kickstarter up to create print issues for Gale, to like do something like revamp or actually finish Small World. And maybe, because Jordan, you're like the letter of Gale, even submit like some of your creative works and stuff, and kind of do like a nice like packaged campaign to help all of us make a little dough for our
Oh,
yeah.
that would
Yes,
be
no,
fun.
yeah,
I think that'd be fun.
Yeah.
yeah. What do you think, Seth?
I really like it because for the longest time I've been wanting to see. I love the art of Small World. There were those things, those certain comment, like it was helping Mitch, and it was Small World, and it was uh, your other art as well that weren't necessarily comics that kind of drawn me to you, and then I kind of got to know Jordan through you after I was like, what is this Small World? And then I kind of was drawn into his story, even though I don't exactly know what's going on. I really loved the opening, and it reminded me of something that kind of like what I would want to do, and what I would want to write, and the kind of comic that I like to write. So I really want to learn more, and it's always been something in the back of my mind. It's like, Angela, I want you to do this. I want you to finish this, but I want you to finish Gale too.
Well, but anyways, yeah, let's like maybe we can talk over chat like later and just kind of actually get it like just finish and get all this done for at least 2020, so we can start kind of getting ourselves out there in like the print and like con world. And also what I think is interesting, Seth, is like you and I like and I think Jordan too, like when you were kind of writing your dark comedy stuff, like I think in a sense we're all into kind of making like realistic characters, like characters that can be relatable, but still also there's something about them that kind of obviously like makes you want to kind of write about them and make a story. It's like you want to kind of make them real, but at the same time they're also doing things that are maybe a little bit out of the ordinary, like the I guess the Herman character in Small World, who lives in a basement and he's scared of going outside. And so I think like with Small World, it's always, I think it fits really within like what we want to do with like Muse and the types of comics that we want. And I don't know, Jordan, like what do you think of that? And like I guess like maybe getting your like official blessing of maybe making this work. And I don't know, maybe it could also be a way like where like we can also put it on both our Patreons, like the Hotcakes Patreon and like the Muse Patreon. It'll just be, we could just use it as kind of a way to hey, look at us, we're we're still doing it and just helping each other, just like promote this stuff and get out there and
Yeah, either way, I think it would be great, because I like honestly. I just dropped my phone on my face. Sorry. When I gave you that script and then I saw the pages that you were doing, I was like, this script is not good enough for this art. Like I'm like shooting above my
nonsense.
Because it was like the first like serious comic script I wrote, and those were the days when I would just like reach out to people and like with no concern and just be like, hey, do you want to draw my story? And which worked out. But yeah, no, I would love to see it finished at some point, just because those pages, I was like, whoa, like this is better than I would have expected. So either way, I mean, if you guys want to, whatever you want to do with it, I think it would be a good story to see, just because then we could make like a little documentary about like the story that never was, that is now.
That is now.
It could be like that the Jodorowsky's Dune or something.
Well,
oh my god, yeah, I was actually just looking at that movie, the Dune, the movie that never was, and it's just like people like I'm surprised like no one has taken it up, and it's not like a Netflix series. You know what I mean?
Well, have you seen that documentary?
No, I've heard of it, and
it's insane.
Oh man, I'm gonna actually borrow it. I wanna. That's one thing I want to watch like over the summer, because like the two artists that are on there, like Mobius and
yes,
yeah. Oh my god, I want to see it because of them, and I want to see like all the kind of sketches and the genius that they put into the movie that never was.
Yeah, if you read, I'll send you the name later. I can't think of it, but there's a book that Mobius drew that they basically used the script for and turned it into a comic.
Oh, they actually turned it into.
It wasn't like called. They took so many of the ideas, and Mobius drew it, and Jodorowsky wrote it, and they turned it into something else, and I'm blanking on the name, but I'll get it to you eventually. And it wasn't Dune, but they turned it. It's basically spiritually Dune.
Okay. Oh yeah, I would love to see that. It's just like his art is just out of this world. Like just I don't even know how. Oh man, just it's like surreal. It's
I know you
like
can't really describe it to people because
yeah
it's
you
like
yeah
you just have to look at it.
yeah it's just crazy. It's like the thing is I find that a lot of like the entertainment products out there, whether it's in the gaming world or like the kind of TV Netflix or like I guess the movie world, I find that I'm not like interested because I feel like nowadays it's like people are just like these big industries. I just feel like are becoming more conservative, where they're just doing remakes and just but with better graphics, right? And I feel like and everything kind of in a sense looks the same. And there is good stuff coming out, popping out, but I just find that when I look at like Mobius's like that era where they were kind of inventing like the world of Dune, I've never seen anything like that. You know what I mean? It's just so
Yeah.
different
Well,
and
it was a time when they were like trying to take more, which is kind of, and I hope this doesn't spoil the documentary too much, but like it was a time where they were trying to take more risks. Obviously, like what ends up not getting the film made, but that's actually their fault because he wanted it to be like 20 hours long, so like, duh, I'm gonna make that. But they were trying to make. And that's what's funny is like you look at a lot of old art writing and comics and stuff, and it is really trying to challenge so much of what was being done. And now I do feel that a lot of it is kind of a lot of the mainstream stuff is quite similar. And so you look at all the stuff that used to be done, and like you're like, wow, this was the '70s, and like now we're at this point where everything's kind of cookie cutter. It's very disheartening.
yeah. I don't, how do you feel about that, Seth?
So, well, actually, I had a thought, and as you guys were talking, we've been talking about like Netflix and all the comic books and stuff that we were wanting to do through Nine Muse and things like that. And then we've talked a few things, like a little bit about webtoons and the creators that we've met through there and things like that. And I was just kind of wondering what you guys were maybe reading or watching or something like that.
Oh yeah, I yeah. Why don't you start, Jordan, as our guest?
Yeah. So one of the secrets to my production schedule is that I basically don't watch any TV anymore. So I'm not really watching much. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I just finished the Stranger Things recently, like everybody, I'm sure.
I haven't started it yet, so.
Oh man, season 3, or you haven't started it at all?
No, not at all.
Oh my gosh, Seth, you gotta watch Stranger Things.
I haven't been watching TV a lot either here
Okay,
recently.
so let me ask you this, and don't no spoilers, please, because I haven't seen
Sure.
like season 3. So I was actually disappointed by season 2 because I felt
Sure.
like they just took the same formula as season 1 and just I don't know, just redid it, right? Like I just
Yeah.
felt like, oh, okay, I liked it. It was mildly entertaining, but I was a little disappointed. So let me ask you this: is season 3 worth it? Like, is
Yeah,
it? Yeah.
it's better than season 2. Everybody I've talked to came away with that feeling, and I do think that they, even the Duffer Brothers, kind of talked about some of the stuff they changed to kind of avoid that feeling. And the other nice thing is it's a small thing, but like this one is set in the summer instead of like the Halloween time, so it does give it a lot more different opportunities to feel different. And I think the characters go through stuff that's way different than the last season, and there's different team ups, kind of, like they break off into different teams than they did last season. So I think it was a way. I think it was not. I'm not gonna say way better because I wasn't like super disappointed with 2 because I went in with the expectations it wasn't going to be as good, but it is definitely up from season 2.
Okay, I'm gonna go in with high expectations then.
Oh no.
So, I will hound you if the expectations are not met.
Oh no.
I'll be like
Oh no.
Jordan,
The-
how could you? But
I'm not going to be able to sleep until I know the answer to this.
but I'm
But
I'm, I'm, I'm actually like it's gonna take a while because I'm probably not gonna watch it till Christmas time.
oh my god,
Because okay so like you I'm trying to like just be very disciplined around like my art and I do freelance, I do the comics, and I also try and keep up with like my personal art and just try and develop that as well. And so like so we have like a rule in the house where we're only allowed to watch videos or play games or whatever like just on the weekends, no videos at all like during the weekdays. So like and it's summer, I don't really want to stay indoors and just kind of be in front of a screen because I'm in front of a screen all day anyways. So so yeah, it'll be probably Christmas, so it'll be kind of a delayed kind of reaction thing. But with that said, like I'm actually reading like a book from like the 90s. I'm really into kind of Anne Rice, who she was the writer of I don't know if you guys remember like Interview with the Vampire.
yeah,
Yeah. So I'm reading her book, The Witching Hour, and it's like this really thick novel that's it's like 1,000 pages, and I'm reading it really slowly. I think I'm only on page like 200 or something. But what I really like about her is that so The Witching Hour, I think it's just I can't really summarize what it's about because I have no idea what's going on. But like, I think it's something about a lineage of witches. So there is this kind of supernatural stuff in the background. But what I love about Anne Rice is that she is an incredible world builder, and a kind of a realistic. And I mean, I guess it's what really drew me into the novel, I'll say, is her description of San Francisco and New Orleans, and how she kind of sets the scene and kind of contrasts and compares the culture, and you really feel like you're being transported to these places, and like that kind of realism with the kind of supernatural stuff happening, like slowly creeping in, is really what drew me. So that's what I'm doing. Just
well, that does sound cool.
And what about you, Seth?
So I've actually not had any time for TV here recently. So when I'm actually, I'm a YouTube guy now. So I will in my off time I will like listen to YouTube videos and things like that. But when I do like watch Netflix, I know I picked up a comic the other day, and basically what I'm doing is in my off time I'm going through and I'm rewatching Dexter right now when I have time, but it's kind of like playing in the background. And I really loved that series when I first watched it, but now since I'm rewatching it, I'm realizing like how bad of a serial killer he really is. It's just completely awful, but it's still entertaining. But it's just entertaining in a different way. Um, but yeah, so that's what I'm doing right now. It's like, just put on something that you've watched before when you're, doing something else. And um, another thing that I'm doing is, I bought this comic about Woody Guthrie and, the Dust Bowl Ballads. And I thought it was really interesting. I haven't started reading it yet because I want to make sure that I have enough time to just sit down and just dedicate my time to it. Because Angela, that I like folk music, and a lot of the inspiration for Gale was Bob Dylan, a lot of songs from Bob Dylan, right? So, and I think I've said that before, right?
Right.
I don't know if I have or not.
Yeah, you wrote a whole post about it, my friend. It's on our Patreon.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of things have been inspired from Bob Dylan. So like he never considered himself a folk, like folk music, but everybody else did, So that's kind of the thing that they just put him in that category, right? So I do like folk music, and I do like comics, and I was like, wow, this is like folk music and comics together. I was like, this should be very interesting because it's kind of like a biography of him and how he came to be. And so I'm really very interested in seeing how that turns out. But yeah, a couple of other comics that I've read though here recently, and a couple months back, were by Enrique Jang, and it was Crossing. I really love that series, and I know she's still coming out with it. So I think she just had a Kickstarter. If it's not wrapped up already, it's getting ready to. I can't remember. I feel so bad about that, but I know I contributed to it, and I really like that because it's about this kind of about this goth girl, and she basically gets hit by this guy, in his vehicle, and he kind of has to deal with her now because she's haunting him, and they're kind of like going to like it's almost like a couples therapy, but it's like how to get rid of your ghost. So it's really awesome. I love it because it's they have they both don't want to be together, like stuck together, but they're having to deal with being together until he can help her cross over. So it's really very interesting. But yeah, those are a couple of things that I've been reading here recently.
Oh, that's like really awesome, Seth. You're like really kind of. I feel like I should read more comics
Yeah.
than I do, but I think I go through my phases. And I actually wanted to ask you guys like so like I think like there's a period like particularly like now where I'm really trying to I guess find my own voice in terms of art, and I find that I in this kind of period I'm of like kind of incubating and like refining my style or whatnot. I find that it's actually helpful not to look at what other people are doing in case like it's like when you kind of see something you can't help but like then have that influence your work. So I guess my question to you to both of you is do you find it like do you find it like there's a point in your kind of creative practice where you don't want to look at other people's work or kind of be influenced by I guess the people that you influence you because you want to kind of start carving out your own voice and yeah your kind of own thing?
I don't know. It's kind of weird for me because like saying reading Crossing, like it's something that I love to read. I honestly don't think I would ever write it, and because obviously I didn't write it, so but I don't even after reading it, it's like it's something that I love to read. It's a story that's really fun, and it's really great, but it's something that I would probably have never written. And her writing style. I don't know about her writing style, but her method of storytelling is just kind of different from mine, and it doesn't influence me at all as far as how I tell my stories. So, and that relates to pretty much everything else that I've read. I think the only influences that I have drawn that have the only things that I have drawn some kind of inspiration from is kind of like Alan Moore. I think but I mean, obviously, we've been talking about him, and every comic writer that I don't know. Like I kind of when Jordan was talking about writing his scripts, and like how detailed they were, I kind of like felt that, because I kind of feel like if you are someone who is a fan of Alan Moore, you kind of do draw inspiration from the kind of comics he wrote, because I think he is the kind of person that writes the kind of stories that I want to write, and I would never probably write anything as good as what he's ever written, and I don't want to compare myself to anyone, even him especially. But I think that that would be the only thing that has kind of influenced the way that I write, and nobody else actually. So I
Oh,
don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, that's probably the only thing that has influenced me. And I don't think anybody else or any other story that I've read's ever influenced me other than that.
okay.
It's weird because I would say, in terms of writing, I think I'm pretty much on the same page with him there because Alan Moore was the person who really kind of convinced me, but inspired me to start writing comics, and so that his writing style is very unique, and so you do kind of it does inspire it. In the beginning, it really inspired me, and then I kind of started to branch off and find my own voice. But what's interesting is in terms of drawing, and maybe this is because I was drawing less than I was writing because I was writing for so many years. I feel like there was a period of time where everybody, like I would pick up a comic and I'd be like, oh, I want to draw like this person. I want to draw like this person. And so like there was a long time where it was like, oh, I gotta stop reading like X, Y, or Z because I'm putting too much of them in my work.
Yeah.
And I think
I think
wasn't
that's an art thing. Then it might
what?
be a thing. It might be an art thing. Yeah, like
Well, I think the thing with art is it's because it's visual. I think it is easier to like put those elements in to your comic because with the writing, like we were talking about, it's kind of like the 10% visibility, so it's not as easy to let that shape you. But like the way somebody draws a hand or a bicycle or something, subconsciously you absorb that.
yeah.
Okay, okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I think sometimes that's why sometimes I really kind of feel like very anxious on social media because like I follow a bunch of artists and it's like it's hard not to look at other people's work and compare yourself to them and where they are because it's like it's just so like kind of you're kind of bombarded with it, right?
Yeah.
And I and that's why I like during the weekend I completely check out in terms of like social media because it's like okay I need to just like not think about that and just kind of focus on okay this is your style, Angela, this is like just keep working in this way and like don't get distracted and because sometimes when I look at it it's like oh I want to draw like a happy cottage or like or I want to try sci-fi. I don't know what it is, it's just like I'm just like I like easily excitable and just like I'm kind of like this secretly like a spaz and so like I don't know I need to kind of have that like isolation time where it's just like okay just like stop looking at what's in the world and just concentrate on what you need to do. So
Yeah, I think Gordy is like my first work where I'm not like actively being influenced by stuff because I was thinking about it while we're talking, and I think the thing is I put so much time into drawing and writing Gordy that like so right now I'm reading the complete works of Calvin and Hobbes. They're like volume 3 out of 4. So I've read quite a bit of it. But I think that like when I'm done writing and drawing for the day, I have to like my brain has found a way to separate like that work from like enjoying Bill Watterson. So like I draw all day, and then I'm like my brain's like, okay, I don't want to think about how Gordy would work in this comic strip or whatever. So you're just gonna enjoy Bill Watterson, and that's all there is to it, buddy. Like don't even try to analyze this. So I think like after a while, my brain just kind of shut itself off between work and studying the comics, because obviously you want to read and read comics to get better at making them, but also I want to not get to the point where I don't want to read comics at all because I'm so kind of fed up with them.
yeah, that's totally understandable, and I think like when we were doing webtoons like more intensively, I did not want to read webtoons because it just reminded me of work in a way. Even though it's just like I obviously like I love making comics and stuff, but it just kind of got to the point where like I just didn't. I don't know. It's just like I just associated that with like like just hard laborious work and I just it got to the point where I didn't enjoy it as much, so it's kind of like for me I guess it's important to kind of pull back, like take a break from like reading and creating and kind of come back at it with fresh eyes so that I guess like it's really figuring out what works for you in terms of life work balance so that you don't burn out, because I think in the beginning I was like kind of burning out like almost every 3 months and I don't know, Jordan or Seth, like if you kind of experience that and how you
all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
You're just burnt out all the time.
I am. I just gotta force myself to not be burnout. It's weird. It wasn't that way. Like say when I was creating, something that it's. I think you'll hear a lot of people, a lot of writers say, you know, write all the time, even when you're not inspired. And our favorite times are always going to be when we're inspired. But you got to write when you're burned out too, even if it's not your best work. Because if you stop writing, and see, so like my writing is not always writing on the script, right? You've seen me like send you pieces of poetry. I don't send you everything that I write, and a lot of times I scribble things in notebooks and things like that. And I might not always be working on the script, but I'm always like writing some things down, like writing in a notebook or tapping away at something or writing a poem or something like that, even when I'm uninspired, because I have to keep going. So that way when I do, feel inspired, those are always the happy times when you write, because you're doing something. And but if you stop writing, that you kind of run that risk of like, probably never doing it again or never getting anything done.
Yeah, I feel that. I always tell people, they always ask me, about writing and stuff. And I always tell them that you do have to push through that, even if it's like, because you do have to get the bad stuff out, or else, because sometimes it just has to come out. And yeah, I think you get into a habit of writing, and if you don't follow that, habit, then yeah, you do run the risk of getting out of and not writing. And so people are always like, I've got writer's block, or this is terrible. And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
just write it out anyway, and you'll
Yeah.
get rid of it, and then you'll move on to your better stuff. So,
Right. And that's exactly what I started dealing with. And, you know, I, I started realizing, I was like, every time I write a script, I was like, and I know, Angela, you're not reading it because you've only read up to chapter 3, which is great. It's fine, because I don't want you to read it anyway, because I'm up to like, so like now what I do is, before I even type on the script, I rough it out on a notebook. And, so I got all this stuff in a notebook now. And, when I'm ready to actually format it into the script, I'm actually going to do that into a script. And I think what I was doing is, I think, Angela, you called me out on this, is like, when I first started writing, I had all this stuff built up in me, all this inspiration, and like, I was writing it. So I knew it was right, and I was, the things that I did have to change, I was editing as I went. So I didn't really have to change a lot of things after I wrote it and formatted it into the script. But like, now where I'm at now is like, I kind of know where I started. I know where I want to go, and I know how I want to end. And I know exactly how it's outlined, and sometimes I go away from the outline and have to hone it back in, just kind of like I do when I'm on the podcast and I just start talking about random things, and you have to pull me back in, kind of do things like that. but what I do now is I write in a notebook, and before I even put it or format it into a script, I go ahead and make sure that that's everything that's going to go into it. And so it's basically wrote down. So if, Google crashed tomorrow, or if anything crashed tomorrow, I'd have it in my notebook and I would remember it.
That's really great. It seems like both of you have like a kind of a method or like a discipline that you keep up in terms of writing. And it sounds like even when you're not inspired, you're kind of doing something.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of like the kind of art side of things, what I try and do now is there's two kinds of phases to to kind of the art side. And let me know if you agree with this, Jordan. Like, there's the kind of the creation side. So that's when like you're trying to compose the scene and trying to do the layout and just try and visualize like what it is you're kind of trying to do. Like that kind of takes this kind of creative effort, because you're making something out of nothing. Like that's the kind of creative part. And then there's the kind of technical part, which is cleaning up the line art and even painting. Like rendering it is, I guess, not as brain intensive. So like I find that like, so switching between the two, and this is what's great about like working on like a bulk of pages at once. It's like you can kind of choose the stage of the process. So for me, like it's really draining to constantly think of like new things and like new kind of solutions, if you will, to like these visual problems of fitting this and this and this in, and then versus like the technical part where you're just it's almost like kind of like an exercise. You're not like you're tracing over your drawing, or or coloring it or something like that, which I don't think, like, once the layout of the page is done for me, that's like the hardest part. And then the other part of just making it pretty is the downhill part. And so I think having just having like a carving out time to do both, and kind of doing it like kind of interspersing it together, like that helps to even out the burnout, and while kind of being productive at the same time, right? Because you keep moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. Because mostly I agree because like, yeah, what you're saying is, because what I do is like I'll start with loose pencils, and that's very loose pencils, because I do see how it would be in my brain, but then like a lot of times how I see something in my brain is not necessarily the most practical way to drawing it, or the easiest way, or like maybe that day I'm just like, all right, I don't want to draw that anymore. So yeah, so I do the pencils, and that is the hard part, because like you said, you're making something from nothing, and it's almost like an outline. Like once you're done with the pencils, you have that outline. So yeah, it does become more technical. Like you see the lines, and you can follow them, and you can draw. So yeah, the inking, which is the more technical part, is I would say it's a more of a almost muscle memory, because like once I get to inking, it's like, oh, okay, I've drawn Gordy's beak like 600 times at this point, so I can just kind of that. But yeah, I definitely agree. Now the difference is, I think what different here is, like, I work every week of Gordy that I do. I work it in the same stage, so I do 5 strips of pencils, and then I ink all of them, and then I color all of them, and then I letter all of them. And I just find that it's easiest to get the penciling all done right away, while my brain is still kind of because like I feel like switching, for me, it's like hard to switch between penciling and inking, and then going back to penciling, because my brain needs to be like, okay, I'm in inking mode, so I can just follow these lines.
Yeah. It's sometimes it's like it's hard to kind of switch between that, and I think for me it's also hard to switch from like the kind of creative production side to like also like being out there on social media and like promoting it at the same time. Like Jordan, I think you have to kind of handle all that, and like that brain switch to me, it's like that to me is the hardest, as well as kind of switching between like the different processes of drawing.
Yeah, the social media thing is like, because when you're switching, at least if you're switching between drawing, it's like at least I can still switch between gears of stuff that I'm like not necessarily interested in. It's not like I'm disinterested in social media, but it is a completely different part of the brain, and so it's like I'm switching between the right side of the brain to the left side of the brain. It does get complicated. You have to do a completely different set of skills. You have to be able to talk to people, and you have to know the algorithm and the hashtags. It's another language.
Yeah, and even now, since I've made like Google Business, I kind of write the metadata on the photos that you kind of put up and everything, and it kind of helps. Yeah. So, as far as like, let's see, what I had a thought. Remember how I do? I get these thoughts in my head and then they just go away. Yeah. So I was gonna say something, but yeah, I forgot what I was gonna say.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like Seth, whatever you were talking about, I'm just like, oh my god, that's like the metadata. Like, what is that? It's like way over my head. I just like,
I had the same thought.
I'm like, oh, I just can't be. Sometimes I just like can't be bothered by that.
So,
But
so you can
maybe,
go to like Geo Imager or whatever, and you can post up a photo and it'll write the metadata on it. So when you post it up, it will optimize your search engine to find what you're like basically, well, in certain businesses, like you will throw like, because he was talking about hashtags, right?
Yep.
And so hashtags are kind of the same thing. You'll throw like keywords up in your metadata that, like, maybe if you're a business, you'll throw up like words that are competitive businesses, that are, businesses that are competing with you. And it'll kind of like when somebody searches that business, they'll find you. And it's kind of like sneaky, but at the same time, it's like, it's how you get discovered.
Okay, that's a
Mhm.
great tip. And speaking of which, like maybe I know we were talking about this before we started recording, but maybe we can just quickly talk about like social media platforms for promoting comics, and more specifically, the question that I have for you two is just how do you guys, I guess, like what do you guys use? What kind of methods do you find that are most effective, and yeah, and just mostly for my own selfish purposes, like how do you guys use Facebook and Twitter?
So I'm not perfect. Um, and I've uh, I've gotten away. I know how to use Instagram, but I haven't been using it the way that I need to here recently because of time. So basically, we just recapped our whole first chapter on Instagram, and finished it not too long ago, and then just started in with chapter two, and basically, I try to keep up with it as much as possible by trying to post a panel like every day, and I'll try to fit the hashtags in there later because like when after all the regulars have seen it. But what I was doing first is, I think you can remember when I was posting things on Instagram, I was actually putting some kind of relatable quotes and things that relate to, maybe some kind of outside source that related to what we were doing. And it would kind of like, I think people could actually, if they read the caption, they could actually maybe relate to the caption, and then draw like some kind of comparison to what we were trying to communicate through the panel, or through the actual artwork that we were posting. But really, in general, in all social media platforms, it's about reaching out to your audience and being real and being who you are. And I think I've tried to do that with pretty much everybody that I've come into contact with. I just, I'm I'm really thankful that they notice, what we're doing. But at the same time, it's not just, hey, notice me. I get those all the time. And it's like, I went down this whole rabbit hole of people are like, hey, get in this like group chat where, everybody kind of like, likes each other's stuff. And it's like, there's the algorithm thing where we just, if we get enough people in here that like it'll like, raise you up or whatever. And I was like, okay, but I felt after I did that, I kind of got out of that because I was like, and I left the chat because I was like, this is kind of like selling out. It's like people aren't really liking my content because they really like it. They're just liking it so they can get likes for their own stuff. And I was like, and it's nothing to them. Like, I know that everybody's trying to get out there and trying to raise themselves up, but it's like, you've got to be genuine,
Mm.
and you have to be going out. And that's the only reason like that I've had as much success as I've had, because it's like, I actually look for other people's stuff to like, and I actually go and I support other people's stuff. Like, and I met so many people, I met, Jenny Wood, you know, shoot, there's so many people that we've met, like I could go on and on, um, you know, and just name off so many people that we've actually came into contact with that's actually helped us out, and it's just because I wasn't trying to reach out for myself. I was reaching out and telling people how much I like their stuff, and then the conversation directs to your stuff eventually, and it's not that you're I mean, obviously there's these times like there's a time and a place where you have to say, "Hey, have you seen this?" Or "Hey, we're doing this podcast. I wanted to know if you wanted to look at it, you wanted to, kind of support it." And there are those times, but when you introduce yourself to someone, it's kind of like, well, my mom had a boyfriend, and the first time I met him, he tried to like propose that I go into business with him. And I was like, you don't do that with somebody that you don't know. You don't propose. I was like, this is a sketchy dude. It's like, this guy doesn't even know me. I don't even know him. And he's like wanting to go into business with me for something I don't even know about. And it turned out he was a sketchy dude. He stole money from my mom. So it's
Wow.
like you don't go and meet someone and just automatically start saying, "Hey, will you buy into my stuff?" I mean, it's something you got to eventually you know you got to eventually talk about, but it's got to be you've got to build a relationship with people, and that's really truly how I see all social media platforms. The only thing that I would say that it's different with like Twitter is because when you post something on your own wall, it's like sending a message in a bottle and hoping that someone receives it, and then hoping that when they send it back, it's something worthwhile. Or
Okay.
at least hoping that someone gets it and then kind of sends it to their people, in their area. Um, but what I've noticed with Twitter, what you have to do is you can't just post things on your wall. Um, you have to actually engage with the community. So you actually have to go to other people and you have to talk, with other people on their threads and things like that. And then what you'll notice is that people will be more interested in what you have to say because they'll know you, they'll get to know you. And that's why we're doing this podcast, Angela. It's like so people can get to know us, when they listen on YouTube or something, because I think that's a platform that we haven't really ventured into until recently. And maybe this will help, sending out
The
the
message, yeah.
podcast, yeah,
Yeah,
and sending that message out.
it's also like it's a good point that you made about I guess these engagement groups where you like someone. It's like you pat someone on the back and they pat you on the back. It's kind of in a sense like that's the kind of dehumanizing aspect of social media that I don't like, where it's very transactional.
Right.
And I think you're right in kind of pointing out that it's really about building genuine relationships,
Yeah.
and
It's not
it's
about it's
yeah.
not about make sure you comment on this. Like that's
Yeah. Like if you see something you like and you have a genuine comment, you have to kind of, your intention is just to leave a nice comment. If they end up checking out your stuff too and commenting back, that's great. And if not, you can't be sad about it, because I think people can kind of sniff out like if you're like what your intentions are, right? So it's kind of like it's just spending time, I suppose, like from what I hear from you, it's just spending time from like on the platform, and just like making genuine comments and connections. And what I like about Instagram is that it makes it really pretty, and it makes it easier to like interact with the content. And so you can put out your art, and then people can like just kind of engage with you through that, and it's like a conversation starter. Whereas I'm very intimidated by, say, Facebook and Twitter, where it's like, oh, now I have to say something. It's like, for me, it's like walking into a room full of strangers and trying to, I don't know, like get in on that
yeah.
conversation. So yeah, but that's all
Well,
really great.
and that's what I've noticed about Facebook. It's like, that's why we have so much more success with Instagram, because you have that conversation piece, whereas with Facebook, you kind of get the conversation. Well, it's a one way conversation. It's you. It's kind of like a monologue, right? When you're doing a status, it's like they see you talking about something, and then if you post a picture, it's at the bottom. Whereas you get the content up front, and so this is very important as like creators who are doing you know comics or short video clips of like maybe an indie film. You know, they put this content there, and it's there for you to see, and that's the content you want them to see, and then you have the conversation below. And that's why I kind of like Instagram, because it kind of gets the conversation rolling, because you kind of get everything out there up front and everybody sees it, versus I read the status first and then I see what's at the bottom, you know. And then Twitter is not so great for putting content out there that's visual. It's more like, you know, you have something short and sweet to say and you want to promote it really quick. But yeah, that's why Instagram has kind of worked for us a lot more.
Okay. And what about you, Jordan? Like, what are your kind of experiences and likes and dislikes about social media?
Well, I would say that yeah, Instagram is definitely the best one for visual stuff. Like if you're doing comics, because like you know, Seth said it really well. You have it right there, and then um, people comment on it. And you know, with I did a separate account for Gordy, so I was going to do it every day, and that one it's like that's where I get the most draw, and I don't really know how. I guess just because like I put some like research into or put some marketing out there for Instagram. Facebook, I find I have more of a like that's more of a personal one where like even my Gordies are mostly seen by people who are close to me, like family and stuff. So I don't get a huge broadcast from Facebook. And then Twitter is something I have yet to crack at all in the years that I've been on there. I think Seth is right; it's not very good for visual stuff. I think a lot of Twitter to me seems to be a lot of the sharing culture, the retweeting, and maybe that gets like you said, you have to react with people on there, and it is a lot easier just to put your stuff up and be like, here I am. So I've had my best experiences on Instagram. I have one follower on Instagram who leaves me these amazing comments every day. I think you might have seen them on Facebook. I put a picture up of it, and it's just like the craziest stuff. He just says the most crazy stuff, and so I just love that platform.
I remember
Whereas Facebook, it's like a lot of my family members are like it, and then Twitter, nobody interacts with me, so I don't know what the deal is.
Yeah, no, like that's the thing. Like, it's weird because back in 2014, 2015, I was just not even trying. I was basically like throwing my stuff out there. And it's like, okay, like throwing these little messages in a bottle out there. And, it gets, I actually I went back through and looked at Twitter and looked at my engagement. Then I fell off of Twitter for maybe a year. Okay. And then, I had a good following, like, of people that would engage with me, like every time I posted or every time I was speaking or anything like that. And it just like fell off. And then I tried to get back into it. And it's like, ever since then, even now that since I have actual stuff that I'm actually putting out that I actually want people to look at, that I care about and want to do something with one day. It's like nobody is there. Like it's like a ghost town. But like I will definitely. I think Twitter's fun. I use it on my personal account all the time because I will. I follow people on there that I really enjoy following, and we have really good conversations in their thread because they have a good following, and that to me, is why I use Twitter on my personal account more than anything, because I like following other people and seeing what they're up to. But as far as like the Gale Twitter, like it is a ghost town right now.
Oh, interesting.
I will tell you real quick, the benefit to Twitter is that Instagram and Facebook are owned by the same. They're both Facebook now, and so there was that day where Instagram and Facebook were down like all day.
I remember
it was what?
I remember that day.
Well, see, here's the thing. It was specifically you can you couldn't load images. And so I went to put Gordy up that day on both the sites, and it's only an image, right?
No.
So it wouldn't work.
Uh,
So I was like, so Twitter you can do it, but it's like if I'm trying to put a comic out every day and I can't put an image out, and it was like the second time this had happened in like 3 months, so that's
yeah.
something to be careful of.
Yeah, and I was on Twitter, and I just actually went to Twitter for the conversation of, people like, because you know how people are. They were like bashing Facebook and Instagram, and like there was nothing else you could do besides listen to the jokes that they had, and it was funny at Facebook's expense.
Oh wow.
Do you remember? You probably don't even remember that, Angela, because you don't even get on Facebook.
Oh yeah, I'm just like, oh my god. Every time like I try, like every time I get into Facebook, I just I'm not a fan of like the interface or whatever it's called. I'm just every time I look into it, I just don't get it, and I just don't want to do anything. And like people that I know in real life, they send me these these friend requests, and then I respond to them like 3 months later, and they're like, oh,
Yeah.
finally, like, and they think I'm like, snubbing them or something, and it's just really, I just can't deal with Facebook. It always crashes on my phone, so I don't use the app. I actually have to go into like onto my computer. And the thing is, most of the people that like the people that I kind of I've known throughout my life, like in university and high school, they're on Instagram too, and so it's like the same people, right? But I guess Instagram, to me, it feels more like it's open to the public.
Yeah,
And
it seems like it. Yeah.
yeah, and honestly, like the people, like the people in my life that like I'd rather like not really interact with them on social media, but just kind of try and like hang out with them in person like once in a blue moon. So yeah, it's kind of weird to me.
Yeah, it's really funny because you didn't have an Instagram before, Gale, and then you
Oh yeah.
created one,
So
and it's really weird that we actually met on Twitter, and we're not, really fans of Twitter anymore. But
Twitter was really fun
it
when
was,
back
yeah,
in like a couple of years ago. It was a lot of fun, and I felt and it was a great way to meet like I don't know, I think a lot of writers use Twitter because it's like that's what it's for, right? You're 140, when it used to be 140 characters, they would just write like witty stuff, and you retweet it or whatever. And I just liked it. It was just like so cool, and it was so easy to get like lots of followers, right? Because everyone was just very engaged. And then actually, Seth, like when you put Gale on Instagram, like it took me a while to actually go on Instagram, but you were telling me, you're like, oh look, Gale's getting a lot of attention, like come and look, and blah blah blah. I'm like, okay, whatever, I'll look, and I'm like, whoa, like wow, 100 likes, like we only get like 7 interactions on Twitter. Maybe I should like try out this Instagram thing. So you're
yeah.
actually the one responsible for my Instagramming.
A lot of that 100 likes thing is, is about that ADHD culture too. Though you only get so many quality fans, or followers, you know, and I don't know the statistics of it, but I know that everybody that likes your that likes your post is not exactly concentrating on that post, right? So like you might get a lot more likes, but you're not necessarily getting that many more dedicated followers, and so I mean I think we were getting more than just 7 at a time. But it was really when we started getting the comments when I was like, wow, people are actually stopping long enough to actually say something about this. And right now we're kind of in a rut, I think, on Instagram. We do still have a lot of people and I see the same people all the time. Every time I post something, it's just like instantly like the same people are liking our post, and I've engaged with those people, and they're like, yeah, we really like the stuff that you're doing. So
And I really
I really
appreciate,
appreciate that.
yeah, I
Yeah.
really appreciate like those core people, because I noticed like a drop too. And I think like social media to me, it can like screw with your brains and emotions, and I told you this before, Seth, where it was just like sometimes it's like when you kind of look at it, it's a dehumanizing kind of experience when you just count likes or followers and use that
Right.
as the metric of how well you're doing. And
Your
Jordan,
self worth
yeah,
is worth more than
yeah,
that. You know?
yeah, and it's like, and it's really not about like how, like the numbers, like how many likes or like followers. It's like, for me it's like, well, how much human engagement, like how much, what is the quality of like the comments that people are leaving? Are they actually like, staying long enough to get what you're doing and like put out a comment that is kind of, like those comments that you get where it's like, oh yes, I was trying to do that and you picked up on it, like, so those are the ones that that I look for, rather than like count likes and stuff, because you can really kind of go into a spiral of depression if you put your self-worth on like just numbers as a metric,
Yeah.
which doesn't actually represent anything, right? It's really, and like you said, you've actually got to go out there and act like a human being and like comment on other people's stuff and try and build like relationships. But yeah, I don't know. Jordan, like how do you like, do you have like certain metrics or certain things that you look at and have like goals for social media, or are you just kind of like, okay, I'm just going to put myself out there and not look at the stats? And
Well, I do. I've gotten better about this, but I do get really caught up about likes and numbers and the like stuff like that. Um, when I started doing Gordy, I obsessively checked uh, my Instagram and my Facebook and my Twitter and stuff to see how it was doing. But just the sheer number of times I put Gordy out a week has whittled me down, because like I just can't check my phone that much, or I'll like lose my mind. But the thing
Right.
is, Gordy has taught me a valuable lesson, because I put out a Gordy that I think is ubiquitous, and it doesn't get as much interaction as something that I think isn't as funny. So it has taught me that I just have to throw my comment out there and see what people think, because I can't. Because like the comics that have the highest number of likes on Instagram and Facebook are comics that I kind of thought as throwaways. So I'm just like, okay, there's no way to anticipate the human reaction to this. I'm just going to put it out there. But that being said, when I get more comments on, like you guys were saying, comments on Facebook are a big thing, and comments on Instagram are a big thing, because yeah, people are stopping and talking. So that's kind of how I measure it. Because I try not to get caught up on the likes, but but if people are the other thing is, now that Facebook does the I don't even know what to call them, but like you can like a status or you can laugh at a status,
Oh
or
yeah.
love a status. If I get more of those on Facebook, like more than just likes, then I kind of count that as a sort of interaction, because like a step between communicate or commenting and liking, because a lot of times they'll put the laughing one, or if they put the heart one, then it's like, more than just scrolling and liking. It's like, okay, I actually really laughed at this.
Yeah.
So those are good.
So one thing I want to ask you, Jordan, is I know that you've been reading Gale as it goes, as you letter it, because you want to be surprised. And I'm just interested to see like what you think about like what are your favorite characters basically in Gale right now?
I like. I've always liked Lori, because when you were talking about him being kind of bumbling, it kind of put in it kind of put the pieces together for me that she's like done a lot of. Uh, I don't know about the work, but like every time there's like a confrontation, I feel like she's kind of taking the lead, and I never noticed that until you said that, and I was like, oh my god, he's totally right.
Yes, he is
Uh,
a level head.
yeah, I like that. How do you say the guy's name who is in the car with them right now?
Oh,
Fairmont.
Yeah, Gary Fairmont.
I don't know why, but I think that he's like one of those characters that I like, but I hate at the same time, just because the way I like him. I don't like him, but I like the way he talks. Like when I'm lettering him, I'm like, man, I really like the way that this guy, like his dialect, his cadence. I really like the way he talks, which
Nice.
may be a weird like letterer thing, but because I'm putting his words together, oh, I'm like, there's something about this guy who's like a cowboy kind of, you know?
Yeah, yeah. He has he definitely has a history to him, and I think that we will one day see more of him. I think I told Angela like there's way more that I want to do with that character, and which is why he has so much depth to him right now. Even if he's just one of those secondary characters that come and go in the story,
Yeah.
and come back and forth. Yeah.
Yeah, not to try not to spoil it, but I I like the interaction between him and Lori because she's like constantly kind of shutting him down, and I just think I don't know. There's something when I'm reading that I'm like, I don't know. She's kind of the star for me.
Yeah. Did you? So like, I don't know. I caught. So me and Angela were talking about her facial expressions, like she was just there and doing her own thing, and she kind of feels like I don't know, like well, she kind of does feel patronized, right? And
Yeah,
she kind of feels minimalized, but at the same time, I think that Angela was talking about how he's kind of being kind of sarcastic in a way, but he's still anybody that's overtly sarcastic, even though they don't really mean it, in a serious way. It's like you're still an asshole.
yeah,
Yeah, I feel like Fairmont. I think the way that I read him, I think he has a really good heart. But he likes to provoke people. Like he knows how to really press other people's buttons, and for some reason he has it in for Lori. And I just think it's like really funny that they're very like those two just like don't get along. I don't know why I get the sense that Fairmount is good, but like even though he's kind of a jerk on like on the exterior, but I don't know. That's just how I interpret it.
So, Angela, can you guess who my favorite character is in Gale?
Is it Seraphine?
Yes.
That's
that was
my
my
no.
guess.
That's my favorite character too. That's my favorite character. She's very complex, and I don't really know what to make of her. But she was absolutely like the most fun character that I drew, and I think I like that she's like, and I got to like really challenge myself making like this older like elderly woman character, and also like her younger version, right? So it's kind of like
Right.
that age span. That was like super fun. And she
So,
is, yeah.
so Jordan, have you read What the Water Gave Me?
I have not yet.
Okay. So, that really, so you've only seen a bit of Seraphine then, right?
Yeah,
So yeah, so really, you're not going off of as much as Angela and I already kind of know about the character, right? So it's kind of like you've probably just seen a glimpse of what she is, and
you know,
yeah.
I still that would be my guess for your favorite character. I don't know why, but even just like a little bit of information, I was like, that would be the answer.
So say what now?
I was just saying that even with that little bit of information, I felt like that was going to be your answer for favorite character.
Oh yeah,
So
Oh wow. Okay.
I'm just perceptive.
yeah. So yeah, but if you definitely get some time to read, it's an 8-page short. If you can read What the Water Gave Me, I know I'm sending it to you, but you're one of our patrons, so I know the format is weird because you have to go through the posts and read it as it's updated. But once I get you get the books, sent out to you. Um, definitely check up on that and read it because you'll get a little bit more insight to who Seraphine actually is, And then obviously, as the series goes on, she's definitely going to play a bigger role than just chapter 2. So that's why she's my favorite character so far, not because of what we have out, but because of what is coming.
And
Not going to try to ruin anything.
and you know, it's interesting to like and I wanted to ask you guys, like, you know, whether you prefer like reading comics in print or like on web. But I'm like really old school, and when I saw you know, the what the water gave me in print, it's just like, oh, this is really what I made this for. And my partner, who's been watching me, like, you know, draw this comic like over my shoulder for like weeks. He never actually read it until it was in print, and when he did, he you know, he was just immersed, and it was the first time, like, he told me, he's like, wow, this really creeped me out, like, or this kind of gave me chills, right? Because something about like just being, I guess, unplugged from, you know, the internet world, which is wonderful and interesting, but sometimes it's like just kind of being quiet and reading like a book in its bookish format is kind of, I don't know, I guess that's kind of what I'm, you know, designing and drawing all this for.
Well, I think that's why I think that's why I've always wanted to write anything, is to see it in print. So, um, seeing what the water gave me in print, like, really let me, like, kind of solidified that idea. You know, like, we tried webtoons and we tried the web comic, and it's great. And then, you know, the way we have to format webtoons and everything like that, we kind of, you know, we kind of have to, I don't know, we kind of have to destroy a little bit about, you know, I kind of like your paneling, and it kind of destroys the paneling. It still gets the story out. The art's still great, but the paneling is part of it. And when you separate the paneling like that, and, you know, you kind of like, I don't know. I don't want, I guess I said destroyed, and it's really my opinion that that is what it did. It's not the way it's supposed to be read, but it's the way it has to be read on webtoons. So I think that if the people that read it on webtoons loved it, I think that if they got it in their hands, and read it the way that you actually draw the pages, and put the paneling together, I think that they would understand, especially like the paneling where, you know, Gale is reminiscing about the accident that he was in, without giving too much information. I think that when you paneled that, that was like, you know, it kind of like went from this, you know, you had, you know, these black pages with the paneling, you know, in like in the black, and then it went straight to like he was remembering something, and it was like a white background. And I'm getting a little bit of feedback right now, so that's why I'm kind of like trying to concentrate on what I'm trying to say. But um, and then you kind of made the panels like jagged, and it reminded me of, what was that comic? I'm trying to think of the artist. Do you know Jock?
Yes.
You do, Jordan?
Yeah, yes. I'm not
He has
super
some
familiar,
crazy
but
panels too.
what'd you say?
He has some crazy paneling too. And
Yeah.
I'm not trying to relate Angela's art to Jock, because it's like they're vastly different. But I think that he's like very haphazard, and it reminded me of how haphazard Jock is, and like and like Angela kind of went with it. Like, it's still a little bit more organized, but it's still very haphazard in the paneling. I don't know. I kind of drew that comparison.
Jack, are you talking about Jack Tardy?
No,
Or
it's Jock.
Yeah, that's like his pen name is Jock.
Yeah,
oh, it's just
He does some stuff for DC. He's done Batman, I think.
yeah.
just so sorry. What do you, how do you spell it?
Jock.
Oh, Jock. Okay. Okay, let me just. Oh, you guys go ahead and talk. I'm just like
Yeah, I
googling
see.
stuff. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he's
Oh,
done.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow. Okay.
See how his paneling is, and it's but my thing is like you kind of changed it up, and it just kind of reminded me of that. Like I said, your art styles are vastly different, but I just drew some kind of comparison to the way he does his paneling, and um, that's just how I felt when I started reading those pages, because your paneling is fantastic, and if you look at his paneling, like it's some next level stuff.
Oh yeah, yeah. This is pretty. This is pretty wild. But actually,
Yeah.
the inspiration for like the jagged kind of paneling, that actually came from. I was reading a lot of manga at one point, and because they're available like at our library, and I was just kind of reading it, and like I guess for some of the action scenes, they always kind of made it jagged to make the page more dynamic, and so yeah, so I try to incorporate that for the pages that needed to be a little bit more jarring, I guess. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, we're okay. So we're like actually past 3 hours right now,
Yeah.
and I'm like,
I think we got enough content.
I think so too. So maybe we can call it a day because I'm like like almost falling asleep here.
Yeah, so that's
not,
great.
not that it was like in any way like a dull conversation. I really thoroughly enjoyed all of it, but it's past my bedtime.
Right.
Yeah.
So basically, what I'll say is, Gale Force, if you're out there and you're listening, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, because this is what we're trying to grow right now. And if you like and subscribe and leave a comment for us and let us know what you think, and we'll try to answer to as many comments as we can. And have a good day and have a good night,
Oh
because
yeah.
I'm going to bed.
Oh wait, I just want to also just quickly sneak in there. Thank you, Jordan, for joining us for this very long talk. It was great
Um,
having you on.
Where am I?
yes, thank you for having me. It's nice to kind of uh, just talk about the real making comics and the just all of it that I don't get to talk about every day. So that's very nice.
Yeah, and hopefully, we can kind of continue this in our chat and just kind of at least I don't know. It's kind of a lonely process, so it's nice to kind of maybe check in more often and than not, and yeah, and just kind of keep going.
Yeah, just like check on every now and then to see if I'm still like functioning alive.
Yeah, especially after reading like one of your waters. Um,
Yeah,
it's just
every Monday I'm gonna get the check-in text like, "How you doing, buddy?"
You still alive? All right.
all right.
Well, it's been fun, guys. I appreciate it. Gale Force out there, like I said, like and subscribe and leave a comment, and let us know what you think. And yep, we'll see you next week.
Okay. Take care. Bye bye.